So when we're looking at this revised delivery, one of the things that should jump out at you right away is the much more compact nature of this arm action. Where in the previous delivery, we had a lot of excessive length in the back here, which was creating some timing issues into landing, partly due to the counter-rotated nature of his shoulders, and a little bit due to the lack of awareness for what that hand was trying to do during the stride phase. So if we slow this down and kind of walk through it, you notice we were actively trying to cue that thumb to stay inside the back hip as the stride phase unfolds, so that as that lower half sequencing plays out, that hand's in a lot better position to start the external rotation process and get up on time into landing. The only problem is you'll notice we probably had a little bit too much flex in that back leg, which was driving us over the toe and putting us in a little bit of a closed off position on the stride. Nothing major in the grand scheme of things, but definitely something to pay attention to as we move forward, and something we might want to correct back into a more neutral online landing. If we look at this side shot, you notice that we're no longer inverted here with this hand positioning. And as we started that external rotation process a little earlier, now we're up on time, which allows this humerus to center in the socket in a much cleaner fashion. So now we can get the rotator cuff to function and keep that humeral head centered as we enter that layback phase. Now the key here was trying to coordinate that back leg action and that throwing arm action. So in the previous delivery, we had probably a little bit too much length in the back and a little bit too much extension from this back leg without adding any rotation. So if we look at the side shot from before, you'll notice that the main pieces of this delivery were still pretty solid. It was just a matter of understanding where the length was coming from and what we needed to do to get it up on time. So if we look at this, you'll notice that that thumb action is driving deep behind the body line, and this back leg is actually working in a strong position, creating a nice vector to push the pelvis forward. The only problem is that it was probably staying extended too long without activating the rotation component of turning that pelvis. So as a result, we were never triggering that hand to start on time. And as we get into that landing, now we're very late and we're having a hard time getting that hand into a position that can center the humeral head and allow that rotator cuff to function at a high level. And as a result, now we've got to clear space by killing this front leg and not bracing properly. So now we're diffusing some of those ground force reactions to get that hand up on time before we can accelerate it. And as a result, we're losing our pelvis positioning, so now the front hip can't leverage properly, and we're going to end up with a little bit flatter delivery. So we still have good extension here. It's just a matter of creating good angle and throwing the ball downhill and be able to accept the forces on this front hip. So if we go back to our current delivery, you'll notice that as we added a little bit better rotation out of that back leg, now the hand can trigger on time and get up into that solid positioning that allows that cleaner ball and socket rotation here. And by doing that, now we can brace effectively. We can get a solid extension out of that front knee, which is a product of creating good pressure from the backside and pivoting that pelvis down into that front hip properly. So as a result, now our line of acceleration will become much tighter, which in turn will turn over into a longer line of deceleration, which is key in opening up new velocity windows. So if we look at this, by converting that ground force reaction efficiently, now we've created that pivot point on that front hip, which is key in getting that pelvis to situate properly, to get the torso to stack up and allow the arm action to play up out in front of the body, and then allow it to pronate and turn over down into that front hip. As we play through this, you'll see that these decelerative forces that are being taken up by that front leg are key in sustaining the delivery over the long haul. So if we look at the front shot, same thing here. For a 6'6" athlete, we want him to be able to throw the ball downhill and use that leverage to his advantage. So if we walk through this, you'll notice that at landing, now that front leg can brace effectively. We'll pivot through that front hip, and now we'll be able to drive that extension much more tight to our line. We won't have that uncontrolled range of motion where we're locking out that elbow region, creating both lateral and medial issues at the elbow. We're actually driving that thumb through the line of our target, getting ourselves into a better pronated position through that finish, handling those decelerative forces on that front hip, and as a result, getting a full upward rotation and protraction of that scapula, so that our scapular stabilizers are functioning at a high level to help decelerate that arm as well. So when we look at this one more time, you notice that by stabilizing ourselves and getting our hand up on time, we've allowed ourselves to work through a much more efficient line of attack.